¿Qué tal amigos? ¿Cómo están? Gracias por estar aquí presente nuevamente en una programación de Venezuela News y Juan Torres Podcast. En esta oportunidad vamos a hablar o vamos a ver una entrevista traducido en español de un experto que ha trabajado múltiples años con el tema de luchar en contra del tráfico de pequeñitos. ¿Quieres saber la verdad sobre los archivos de Epstein y todo lo que nos han estado ocultando? Aquí tienes la explicación. Si tienes unos 25 minutos, vale la pena ver esta entrevista. Esta persona que ven a la derecha, que se llama Jaco Boines, es fundador de esta compañía, Ministerio Jaco Boines, sobre el tema del tráfico humano, todo lo que tiene que ver con tráfico, señores, todas las investigaciones y detener a todas estas personas que han hecho tanto mal. Estuvo en una entrevista con Benny Johnson, uno de los creadores de contenido de las redes sociales, y él explicó algo muy importante que me parece interesante. Jaco pide investigaciones sobre las instituciones financieras por las operaciones de tráfico de Epstein, una industria de $1 billón vendiendo mujeres y niños libres de impuestos. A través del sistema bancario sacudirá el sistema financiero. ¿Qué quiso decir él con eso? Sí, señores, vamos a escuchar a este experto antitráfico. Revela quién en el FBI está protegiendo los documentos de Jeffrey.
You have so much knowledge about this industry and the darkness and sickness of it. Could you educate us, elucidate for us what's happening here?
Yeah, Benny, thank you for having me on. What an honor. And it's been just phenomenal to watch your career skyrocket because you're a voice for truth. I cannot honor you enough, Benny. You and your team are doing the greatest work on this subject in the media. There's none better. So thank you very much. There's been decades when we've asked, this is my 30th year in the fight against child sex trafficking, of course, because my sister was trafficked, Ilanka, for
30 años ha estado con esta organización luchando con el tráfico de personas.
Of course, because my sister was trafficked, Ilanka, for 6 years. It took us 6 years to rescue her. And she was sold to men like Jeffrey Epstein, to executive Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company executives. What if, Benny, and by the way, Kyle, your two previous guests are heroes of this nation. That is America's finest in law enforcement right there. They understand what is at stake. This is a battle of light and dark. It's the most contentious battle between Satan and God, is the innocence of children. But what if I told you the powers that control the FBI, because my job is to do gap analysis every day to find out what are predators doing that we don't yet know. And Benny, this crime changes every 10 days. It is so volatile. There's so many mechanisms. We are so far behind the 8 ball. What if I told you that the FBI and those who are protecting what we think is Jeffrey Epstein files are actually protecting Wall Street? What if I told you that the power here that's being protected is in fact not even Jeffrey Epstein or the Hollywood Tinseltown names to your previous guest account? We have the lists of the Hollywood names. We know who were on the flight logs. We know the pilots that flew the planes. We know they've never been subpoenaed. They've never been cross-examined in front of a jury of their peers. It will do nothing. Who's being protected here, Benny, is Wall Street. Do you
Él dice que se está protegiendo de Wall Street.
know that as you and I sit here, we're trading on Wall Street stock in companies that own strip clubs that traffic children today in America? Rick's Cabaret is owned by a conglomerate media company, look it up, that's traded on the stock exchange. You're talking about when this cookie really crumbles and the names actually comes out. Tax evasion, tax fraud, which is a ultra egregious crime in this country. People are going to lose their livelihoods. People are investing in stock that cause human beings to be traded like cattle in this country. This is run by Wall Street and K Street. The lobby, the Free Speech Coalition that just combated us in the Supreme Court 2 weeks ago that said children should have access to when we're saying there should be age verification that's driven by Wall Street. This thing runs into the coffers of America. This is the system that has bought votes in Congress, votes in the Senate, both sides of the aisle. Money talks. The root of all evil, according to the word of God, is the love of money. When you couple money with sexual perversion, you've got a cocktail that Adolf Hitler and Fritz Belusek, under Hitler, made their mandate to groom and prepare a guy named Alfred Kinsey, and said, we will break America's youth sexually. We will sexualize children. Kinsey goes and performs 24-hour around-the-clock experiments on boys 6 weeks old. Kinsey helped write the sex offense section in the model penal code that still exists today. The very model penal code that Pam Bondi wants to execute was written by a funded by U.S. presidents. Now you need to talk George Bush. You need to talk Bill Clinton. You need to talk Barack Obama. This thing goes to Wall Street, Benny. This is why you can't get Section 230 repealed and replaced. Because if it really crumbles and the names really come out, and your two previous guests are right, the names do nothing. We need to see subpoenas. We need to see warrants. We want to see perp walks. You're going to hear names that Americans don't know about: hedge fund managers, venture capital firms, private equity internationally. This thing, at the root of it, Benny, cuts so deep that heads will roll in Congress, in the Senate, in state houses. They buy votes. You understand that most of these men were invited, and women, to a party. Take Sean Combs, for instance, P. Diddy. You say, was Epstein an informant? Yes, Sean Combs was an informant. But remember, just for a minute, Jeffrey Epstein couldn't run what's called a book. On Wall Street, you run what's called a book of business. That's the amount of money you manage as a money manager within a venture capital firm or a hedge fund, your book. Epstein couldn't run a book in a bunch of lemonade stands. He had no book. They built a book for him. Who built the book? Robert Maxwell built the book. Jeffrey actually worked for Ghislaine and for Ghislaine's father. Jeffrey was a target. They made him. They brought Wall Street around him. They built him a book. Why did they build him a book? They built a book around him to manage money, to compromise Wall Street, to get dirt on Wall Street, to bring Wall Street to a party, to surreptitiously film big money managers. They're going to knock on the door with a yellow manila envelope with a photograph of a minor being in a sex act behind him, and he's compromised. And their family is on the block. This is, if you really want to take a scalpel and cut this thing and cut the cancer out of America, you need to start talking about human trafficking in the same sentence as you're talking about Wall Street and K Street.
This is absolutely fascinating. I have to dive in on what you just said about the building of the book. A question that we have regularly asked, that often gets asked: how did Epstein get all of his money? He didn't really provide any services. He didn't seem particularly good. He didn't graduate college or anything. He just went and worked for Bill Barr's dad randomly without any degree at all. Can you please explain that operation? And importantly, Epstein working for Ghislaine, not the other way around.
Yes. And people will say, Jaco, come on. No. Robert Maxwell introduced Ghislaine to Jeffrey. Jeffrey was a target. Just like I told you, Alfred Kinsey was a target for Fritz Belusek. Do you know that Alfred Kinsey made Hugh Hefner? Alfred Kinsey groomed and made Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner became a target. The Love is Love movement of the 60s, the sexual obscenity statutes in 1970 and 71. These things don't just happen. Epstein was a target. He was made. They built this book around him. Let's make it real for Americans that go, Jaco, that's a little far-fetched. No. How does Hunter Biden stand over $4 billion from Burisma? He's not a money manager. They build a book around him. They build trust and money. Now you need to go very deep into securities, and you need to go deep into international trade. They attracted money to Jeffrey. They positioned Jeffrey. Yes, he was an intelligence agent, and it's an intelligence agency, the FBI, and they do not answer to the president. They should. They answer to Wall Street. They answer.
Hay algo muy importante que este experto dice, y es verdad, señores, se está descubriendo que Jeffrey era un agente del FBI. ¿Qué te parece? Aparte de que el papá de Maxwell era agente del Mossad, Departamento de Inteligencia de Israel. Entonces, esto es una de las razones de por qué el FBI no ha querido entregar evidencias, porque se va a descubrir que Jeffrey era un agente del FBI y trabajaba y colaboraba con la agencia, aún así la agencia sabiendo que Jeffrey hacía lo que hacía. O sea, el FBI sabía que Jeffrey hacía estas aberrantes acciones contra menores de edad. ¿A cambio de qué? Para que el FBI lo protegiera.
To Wall Street. Why is the cases in New York? Ghislaine Maxwell was in France and in Israel. Why is she taken to New York? Why is she not taken to Dallas, Texas? Why is she not taken to Washington, D.C.? Why was Jeffrey Epstein in New York? Because Wall Street controls this cabal. This is a para-government system that is the World Economic Forum. So they built a book around Jeffrey. What does that mean? They attract business. They bring people to agree to put money in a pool. Jeffrey is literally put in position. You now manage the money. You're not really managing the money. You're managing assets. These people are assets. Now you're talking about families, wealthy families that diversify their investment portfolio. And all of a sudden they've got a third, 15% of their portfolio is now embedded. Why did they go to Donald Trump? They went to Donald Trump because, and you did a beautiful job yesterday. The best I've ever heard on Alex Acosta. No one ever wanted to talk about Alex Acosta. You did a phenomenal job. I listened yesterday on Trump being the only New York billionaire that played ball, that said, hey, I'll tell you guys what I know. The only one. And not just in 2019, like you reported, in 2007. He helped in 2007. The Jeffrey Epstein case, all the data we have now, we had it in 2007. Nothing's new. Go look at the length of the case. Why haven't you seen new evidence from 2015, 2016? He was trafficking kids until he went to prison. There's nothing about 15, 16, 17. Talking about Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine controlled Epstein. Epstein did not control Ghislaine. In the end,
Mira algo que dice él. Ghislaine Maxwell controlaba a Epstein. Epstein no controlaba a Maxwell. O sea, le está diciendo que el cerebro de esta operación era Maxwell.
in the trafficking world, here are your players. You have a trafficker, then you have two bottom girls that are the handlers that normally get arrested. There's an arm's length between them and the trafficker. They recruit the girls. They're the madams. They normally go and coerce them and recruit them, right? And then you have the one making the sale, and then you have a buyer. Why have we never talked about the buyers? Why we do know what we call the Johns? Why do nobody talk about who bought? If Epstein was a trafficker and Ghislaine was a trafficker and they sold, then you sell a good to a buyer. The buyer's Wall Street. The buyers is American men that are very influential. That's who's buying. Ghislaine ran Jeffrey. Ghislaine reported up to foreign intelligence agents, getting information on American sitting House and Congress members and money on Wall Street, and reported it out of the country and controlled Wall Street from the outside. Jeffrey was as much an agent for the outside through Ghislaine as he was to the inside. Within a normal structure where Ghislaine works for Jeffrey, Jeffrey does not get arrested before Ghislaine. The bottom girl gets arrested first every single time. They take the fall. Like Harvey Weinstein took the fall for Hollywood Elite. Like Roger Ayers took the fall. No, Epstein goes down first because he actually worked for Ghislaine. who worked for her father. Remember, her father was found floating upside down in the ocean off his yacht. Go look at what he was doing at the time. He was going against Wall Street. This is a Wall Street issue, Benny.
Wow. So, what you would presumably see inside of these actual documents would be bankers, hedge fund managers, JP Morgan.
Yes.
You would see the control of America's financial system. And if you control America's financial system, well, then there's every...
Ok, esta persona está diciendo que probablemente los clientes de Jeffrey son personas que controlan el sistema financiero de los Estados Unidos. Estamos hablando de banqueros como JP Morgan, banqueros de Wells Fargo, estamos hablando de banqueros de BOFA, Bank of America, Truist Bank, jefes de clínicas, el Wall Street, la bolsa de valores.
politician in your pocket.
Well, Benny, what if I tell you you can't legally bank marijuana in the U.S. and you shouldn't, right? Boulder, Colorado, they legalized marijuana, THC level of no matter what. You can't legally bank. It's a duffel bag cash system, but you can legally bank the sale of children in this country. The money is flowing through our financial systems. Why have you've seen Zuckerberg, Marsha Blackburn, amazing, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. They call Jason Citron from Discord. They call Zuckerberg in front of Congress. Why haven't you seen the heads of JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Chase, Wells Fargo, HSBC, Royal Bank of London? Why didn't you see bankers and hedge fund managers? Why isn't Wall Street being called? They're banking it. It's a $1 trillion industry. $152 billion a year are spent inside America selling women and children tax-free. It's tax fraud. It's banked through the banking system. Yet, no bankers are being called to the carpet, because it will rock the financial system.
And you'd have total financial collapse, and there's no politician that would ever want that, yes?
Because they're funded by the same families. Now, am I saying that every family that's invested in the stock exchange...
So, ¿qué está diciendo aquí? Aparte de toda esta situación de las víctimas, que esto es un negocio lucrativo para evitar impuestos. Entonces, tú compras a una persona, ese banquero recibe una gran cantidad de dinero libre de impuestos. Entonces, también esto se presta para lavado de dinero.
Understand that there's a fraction of their investment that's held in some sort of a fund that they don't know. And that's the issue. The general FBI agent is a good agent. But they don't get to even see enough truth to share the truth that the American public wants from them. They're blocking Pam Bondi, Benny.
I mean,
Pam Bondi.
You want to talk about a mask-off moment?
I mean,
it's not only that, it's an insult. So they gave her, people don't understand, they gave Pam Bondi a redacted version of something that was already public, which was his address book. So it's like spitting in their face. Yeah. They're like spitting in her face.
Yeah, it's an insult to the sitting elected, duly, rightfully elected president of the United States. The total absolute disregard that Wall Street and the financial sector with sexual immorality has to our government, and the spit in the face of the American citizen, duly elected by the people for the people. They laugh at that, Benny. They run what people call deep state cabal. It's a para-government, and it's international. It is absolutely embedded in the World Economic Forum. It is embedded in international trade. It has as much to do as the debacle in the Ukraine and hiding money. Maybe just remind ourselves that our president...
Entonces, en conclusión, amigos, ¿qué es lo que está pasando aquí? Que Jeffrey literalmente era un títere, el que controlaba todo esto era Maxwell. ¿Quiénes son los clientes o los potenciales clientes de Jeffrey? Banqueros del Wall Street. El Wall Street eran los clientes favoritos de Jeffrey, directores ejecutivos, socios, accionistas del sistema bancario. Entonces, o sea, ¿por qué tienen miedo de que se publiquen estos nombres? Porque podría afectar el sistema bancario, ya que si se descubre que el director ejecutivo de cierto banco estuvo involucrado en la lista de Jeffrey, esas personas van a querer sacar su dinero de ese banco. El banco podría entrar en pérdida. Entonces tiene sentido, tiene sentido. Estamos hablando de banqueros que quizás temen ser descubiertos y que podrían afectar la empresa. Pongamos un ejemplo, a la luz que el director ejecutivo de Wells Fargo estuvo involucrado en la lista de Jeffrey. ¿Qué va a pasar con Wells Fargo? Señores, podría afectar el banco. Obviamente que van a retirar inmediatamente al director ejecutivo, pero esto podría afectar a los accionistas, patrocinadores del banco, clientes que van a decidir cerrar sus cuentas bancarias porque están en contra de lo que hicieron. Entonces, por ejemplo, te enteraste de esa situación y tú estás en desacuerdo con esta sobre lo de Jeffrey y tú tienes una cuenta bancaria en Wells Fargo, tú vas a retirar tu dinero y obviamente esto no le conviene a Wells Fargo, así como otras empresas. Entonces, esto es delicado, pero señores, se tiene que revelar. Eso no se puede quedar así. En fin, déjame saber tu opinión, qué piensan ustedes sobre esta información.